For this episode, I had the absolute pleasure of inviting Kai onto the podcast. He is a emotional intelligence expert and he works with people who have emotionally immature parents. And this episode is so important for us in today's society because we dive a lot into why we need to be paying more attention to our emotional intelligence and maturity. We also talk about the influences of parenting and our childhood experiences have on the way that we are now as adults and how it leaks into our relationships. So, what I will say as we're diving into this episode, there is a little bit of a trigger warning that we do touch upon emotional neglect and abuse. So, as you're listening, please just notice what's happening in the body and just take care of yourself. We also go into emotionally immature parents as a whole. So if you are a parent, also just taking care of yourself if you're noticing anything coming up as you're listening to this podcast. And there's a lot in that we've packed in to be able to support you to navigate these somewhat difficult concepts as well. So we talk a lot about toxic shame. So if you feel like you have a shame wound, this episode is just going to be phenomenal for you. And we just tie it all up and talk about relationships, inner child work, and how to become an emotionally mature individual. What does that even look like? So this really is such a juicy episode that I am so excited to share with you today, my love. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the Relationship Rehab Podcast. I'm Sammy, a certified breakup and relationship coach, attachment specialist, former love addict, and spiritual junkie. This podcast is for you, the hopeless romantic who loves to love, and a safe space for us to explore and heal our attachment trauma, broken hearts, and love addictions. Together, we are on a mission to become the love of our own lives so we can have successful, healthy, secure relationships with others. So if you're ready to create a life and love beyond your wildest desires, you're in the right place. Your journey towards becoming more secure in love and life starts now. Welcome back to the podcast, my beautiful beings. And today I am excited because I am joined by a wonderful guest, Kai. I know Kai from Chiang Mai here, but I also have been on his socials and seeing his content for a while and just really love what he does. So I'm so excited to welcome him on. So Kai is a doctor transformed into an emotional intelligence and healing expert. He loves to empower and guide others on their healing and self-discovery journeys through coaching and teaching. He recently became a published author of Emotionally Immature Parents, a recovery workbook for adult children. Congratulations on that, Kai. And this is exactly what we're going to dive into today, is all things emotional intelligence, emotional immaturity, inner child work, what that all means and how we can start that healing process. So when Kai is not creating content, coaching or hosting lives and teaching people how to heal their wounded inner children, master their emotions and become their authentic selves, he's living his dream life in Thailand, being silly and mischievous with his friends. So without further ado, Kai, welcome onto the podcast.
Yay. Thank you, Sammy, for the warm introduction. I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation with you for the next hour.
Me too. I've been really excited for this conversation because Kai and I, we talk about similar things. We talk about attachment styles and inner child work and emotional intelligence a lot in our work. So there's a lot of intertwining going on with our work. So we resonate with each other in that way as well. So Kai, I wanted to start us off by asking you, why is it important that we become emotionally mature and heal our wounded inner child?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I have come to firmly believe no matter how old you are, like biologically, we all kind of carry this wounded children. And really, there's this quote, I don't know where it came from, but it's like we're all wounded children living inside adult bodies. So it's very important for us to realize that even though we like outgrew our childhood, we left home, some of us like survived, we may be still carrying some of the emotional wounds, the baggage, and the traumas from our childhood. that we haven't fully healed, like released, processed, like integrated, and it still shows up in patterns today, especially in our relationships, but not just with other people, but the relationship that we have with ourselves. So it's like, do you have a relationship with yourself and others where you feel whole? You feel like you can just be yourself and you kind of know who you are and it feels more spontaneous and free and enjoyable? Or does it feel very critical? Do you feel like you're constantly being triggered and reacting, almost like you have no control? And then some of us feel very guilty and bad, and some of us are kind of blissfully ignorant, or we don't even consider some of the reactions, the things that we do and say that could be damaging for ourselves, to the other person, and for relationships. So it's important that we heal, we connect with these inner children, because regardless if we heal or not, we're going to carry this children, like this child, for the rest of our life. And it's going to come out through like almost like trying to get these deep childhood needs met of like seen, attention, intimacy, getting their needs met. But it could kind of come out where we try to get these needs, like these fixings, externally. So really these children, they kind of need us. It's almost like, we've abandoned them. And it's kind of hard to do this work because it's almost like, we're say you're a mom, I'm a dad or whatever, and we abandoned our children for years. And now, present day, maybe after listening to this podcast, you're like, oh my God, I want to start connecting with my child. I want to start healing my child. It's like showing up after 10, 20 years where you just abandon them. And you're like, hey, surprise, mom and dad are coming back. We're going to be a good parent for you now. You can trust me. I won't leave you again. So it's kind of like this relationship that we've always had, but for you to do this work now, it's like this inner parental child relationship. It's a journey that we can go on. Um, yeah.
Mhm. I love that, Kai, that explanation. And it's incredible when we think about this reparenting aspect of healing trauma that we can be the parent that we never had when we're identifying
Mm,
a certain behavior or pattern. I know for me in my journey, it was around unworthiness. And I haven't
mm,
yet covered exactly or pinpointed, but I have an idea. But it showing up a lot in my relationships and my personal life that I just didn't feel worthy of receiving. And then it was when I
mm,
discovered this inner child work and reparenting that I thought, oh my gosh, I can do this for myself. I don't have to be a reactive response anymore to the conditioning that I went through,
totally.
the things that our parents have said to us in our childhood that I get to now change that and reprogram that. And it's such a aha moment of like, oh my God, this is incredible. And you just want to sink your teeth into it and really experience that transformation for yourself. But let us dive into your story as well, Kai. I want to know, I want you to tell the listeners about how you got into this work in the first place with childhood trauma, inner child work, because
Right.
you were a doctor and now you're doing this
Mhm.
work. So give us an insight into that journey of how you went from doctor to emotional intelligence expert.
Yeah, right. Where does the journey begin? I think like inside, I always I think I think I knew maybe at a young age that, I want to help people, want to be a healer. And I think, being Canadian, kind of being in the social norms, uh, the, the rational, logical best way to do so is, to be a doctor. So I kind of, went to medical school. And I think like if I can go back in time, I would not do medical school, even though I'm still paying off the debt. I probably lost the years of my life from stress and stuff like that. But really, like being a medical student, going through like medical school, it unintentionally forced me to heal myself. Like it wasn't part of the program. Like nowhere in Western medical schooling do they help you heal. But really, it was like the most stressful period of my life. And, being Chinese Canadian, like I put school, academics above everything. And it was the first time kind of in my academic career where I was being challenged and my anxiety, like my inner stuff, was starting to spill out. I couldn't mask it anymore. My coping mechanisms were failing me, and it was leading to like even like not being able to continue or pass the program. So I think a big turning point was in my third year of medical school, where the first 2 years it's hard, but you're kind of like in a classroom setting. It's kind of more like a bit protected, and it's still like more educational and less. Whereas in the third year, you're kind of just dropped into the hospital system and you're kind of working basically full time. Plus, you have to study, pass these really hard exams. So it was during that period where I had a breakdown. And really that breakdown, as I'm sure you're aware, Sammy, it could be spiritual awakenings. So that breakdown was pretty scary. I think that was one of the probably the lowest moment in my life where like I'm naturally, hopeful, positive, optimistic, but going through that breakdown, it really felt like I lost all hope and it got really dark. And I didn't have the intentions, I didn't have the desire, but I just never felt so low. And it felt like my dream was falling apart and everything was like, being pulled under my feet. I had to check in to see if I wanted to end things. So very quickly, I realized that no, I don't want to quit. I don't want to quit life. But I just really needed to start taking care of myself. So kind of going through this breakdown, I never really checked in. And I kind of asked myself these two questions. And during this breakdown, it really felt like, I don't know, I was talking to myself, but also it felt like this other voice, like we're kind of talking to each other. And it was like, like Kai, well, I went by Kevin back then, Kevin, this is probably as shitty as it's ever been. Um, this is not okay. We're never going to let ourselves get to this low point again. So the first question is like, what do I need to do to start taking care of myself? Because I wasn't taking care of myself. I stopped going to yoga. I stopped seeing my friends so I can study more. I was drinking a lot of coffee. I wasn't eating well. Binge eating was my coping mechanism. So I had like bags of rice chips. I would like eat once I came home from the hospital. I had 2 bags of rice chips just waiting for me. So I literally would just come home from the hospital like numbly, grab my 2 bags of rice chips and just like eat them. So, what do I need to do to start taking care of myself? And also, it was during this breakdown, I stopped putting medical school and becoming a doctor over my health. And the second question was like, what do I really want in this life? Like, not what my parents want of me, not what medical school expects of me, not what I think my friends and my family expect of me, but what do I really want? So from this breakdown, it's almost like I got like a new path that I never saw before. And this new path was that like I'm not going to kill myself trying to be a doctor. I will take a break if I need to. I will even quit if I need to. Because up until then, I never thought this was an option. So kind of from that breakdown, I took time off school, went on this crazy road trip. And I think during that road trip, I was starting to like discover who I am. And during this 6 month off, I did kind of test out being a coach, but I don't think I was like mentally, emotionally ready yet. And I wasn't sure yet if becoming a doctor wasn't the right path for me. So eventually I went back to medical school as a new person. I had to redo my third year, and I literally went through my last year still not really knowing surely what I wanted to do. And I actually was this close to submitting my application to do 5 more years of psychiatry training. But literally at the very last second, it was the deadline. I did all the prerequisites. I worked with like psychiatrists all around Canada, like Vancouver, Toronto. They wrote me these like letters. And literally it was the night of hitting submit. But I was like, no, this is not right. So then I took one more year off, and that was the year of the pandemic. And that was the year where I really gave coaching like a really honest try. And it worked out. And then I'm here with you today, not as a depressed medical student or resident, but as a happy, thriving coach.
Living his best life in Thailand.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Kai. From what I can hear is that you were spending so many years living up to to the expectations of your parents, which I think a lot of us can resonate with, especially as high achieving, type A, ambitious individuals, where we're
Yeah.
constantly striving in society, where we want to be the best at what we do, and we want to make people proud, and we don't want to be a disappointment. We don't want to fail. And just like your journey, we're on this hamster wheel of just achieve, achieve, push, push, grind, grind, that we exhaust ourselves, we burn out, and we start to have these life contemplations of what the hell are we doing? What's the point of all this? What's my
Mm.
meaning in nearly killing myself in becoming this identity that you're even questioning whether it's something that you actually want? So yeah, a lot of us can resonate with this, and I'm curious, how do we then tie that into childhood trauma? Like, where do you think that's coming from?
Yeah. Kind of tying it back to, childhood trauma where like in some ways it's like we're like almost like plants or like I don't know, we're like a sunflower, for a sunflower or a plant to grow, big, strong, healthy, it had needs, it needed water, nutrition, shelter, protection, and like singing to your flower, the love, the nurturing. So if that flower gets everything it needs, it's gonna grow and sprout and be, healthy, strong, beautiful. So same kind of analogy, as children, we had needs. And it wasn't just like roof over our heads, food, shelter, water, but we also had like emotional needs. And I think that's really where our parents, who a lot of us here likely had emotionally immature parents, which, we'll probably talk about later. It's like, I really believe our parents tried the best with what they knew. In some ways, our parents did give us the food, the shelter, the water, or whatever. But when it comes to emotional needs, like need to be seen, validated, heard, supported, need to have the almost like the support and the encouragement of our parents, but also role models from our parents to show us that it is normal for us to feel these feelings. They mean something, and then we have the right to talk about these feelings, express these feelings, and they're part of who we are, as opposed to our parents. They might have not only not provide us with these needs and safety, they might have in some ways, not intentionally, but there could have been emotional neglect and or abuse. And I don't use the word abuse lightly, but when it comes to emotional abuse, dismissing and invalidating your child's feelings, that is bordering neglect and abuse. It is neglect. I would even argue it's emotional abuse. So we grew up with these sayings like, you're being so sensitive. What are you crying about? You know? And this is how the emotional neglect and abuse happened. So it's almost like, we had arrested development. We learned a lot of harmful messages, and this childhood trauma, it kind of manifests, it kind of lives in our nervous system. It lives in our maybe perspectives. It lives in our attitudes of life, relationships, ourselves, beliefs. And also it lives in our emotional patterns that show up. Um, So we are all like, we're not responsible for what happened to us in our childhood. We're innocent children. It was our parents' responsibility to take care of us, to not neglect us, not abuse us, but it happened. So it's not to blame or shame or whatever, to be stuck dwelling in the past. but it's to kind of acknowledge and own our story and be objective that yes, relationships are confusing. I both love my parent. They both tried their best. And at times they were my abuser. They neglected me. So I'm not responsible for what happened back then, but I have to be, and only I can be responsible for the traumas that I carry, the wounds that I haven't tended to yet, and how this shows up in my behavior, my habits, my patterns. Because even if our parents wanted to fix this, even if our parents take ownership for what happened, they ask for forgiveness, they change, that doesn't change or fix us. It might help us in our healing journey, but don't think that for us to heal or start to heal, our parents need to change, apologize, you know, ask for forgiveness, be punished. If
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I work with a lot of clients who have issues with their parents, if you will. Like you were saying, the
Mhm.
shaming, the blaming comes in. And sometimes it can be easier to go down that direction because, like you said, we think that maybe the answer lies in if only they changed, apologized, took ownership, then I'll be fine. Everything will disappear. When actually, no, it's already embedded into our programming. And it may not be our fault that it's there in the first place, but it is now our responsibility. And that can be a very empowering state to be in, right? Where you're like, I get to change this. I get to look at this and decide, make that choice for myself that I no longer will be a reactive response to this, that I get to be
Yeah.
a different person. And I think it's just important to note just one more time that our parents did the best they can, like you said, Kai, with what they had. And even under the notion of neglect and abuse, what really supported my journey and what I encourage my clients to do is to really say they see their parents as human beings that really did the
Mhm.
best they could. Of course, narcissism, abuse aside, they did the best they could with what they have. And that really supported me in my journey to be able to develop compassion towards
Yeah.
parents and to see that they're just echoing the type of parenting they received without really understanding that they could make different choices in the way that they parented.
Mhm.
And they
Yeah.
also have their own traumas and wounds and shit that is coming up to the surface because there is nothing more triggering, I believe, that would bring up all your trauma to the surface than parenting, business, and relationships.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God, yes. I really appreciate what you shared too for the listeners, because it can be very triggering to hear that our parents tried their best with what they had. But
Hmm.
just to remind you that, we're all wounded children inside adult bodies. That includes our parents. There's also a hurt little boy living inside of our father, hurt little girl living inside of, our mothers. And they're also human, because sometimes we forget. I know this sounds like so obvious that our parents weren't always parents.
Right.
They were adults, young adults. They were once children, teenagers, babies, toddlers. They were all, for us to have that same compassionate empathy, towards our parents.
Yeah. And what I will say, if you're not quite there yet, it's okay. There's stuff to be worked.
Yeah.
Don't force yourself to be in a space of forgiveness and compassion and love and joy towards your parents if you don't feel like you're quite there yet. There's stuff to be processed. There's anger, there's sadness, there's all sorts of stuff that needs to be processed before we get to that space because we might risk pushing it down and internalizing it if we don't integrate it as.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've done a lot of parenting work in my social work days. And what I will say, just observing parents as a whole, is that they shame themselves a lot because maybe
Oh, yeah.
better. Maybe they do really want to be better, but they're stressed, they're tired, they're exhausted. And the thing about being a parent is you can't just shut the door. You can't just take a break. Well, you can put things in place. Sure. You can't take a break from being a parent. It's always going to be a recurring thing. So, if you are a parent listening to this episode, give yourself a lot of grace that the fact that you're here listening to this episode in the first place just speaks volumes to the fact that you do want to make changes and different decisions for yourself as a parent.
Hmm. Yes, and you said the magical word shame or toxic shame, and I think that is part of the childhood trauma is that we grew up in a very shaming kind of like energy and this toxic shame. Toxic shame is almost like a spiritual wounding, and it's underneath the belief that I'm not good enough, where toxic shame, it is an emotion, but it can become an identity where it's like I'm bad, I'm defected, there's something inherently wrong, flawed about me. If someone really gets to know the real me, they'll leave me, they'll abandon me, they'll reject me, they won't want to be with me. And really our inner child kind of carries this toxic shaming. So underneath our parents' is reaction, defensiveness, maybe their perfectionistic drive. It is this deep core wound that I'm bad, I'm defected, I'm not good. And it's really painful for one to really begin to feel into that I'm not, I'm defected, I'm messed up, someone knows this about me, I will be exiled from, from society, from my family. So really that is also what we need to heal is that toxic shame. And really, like I really picture it as like, I don't know, like this really heavy, dark energy. And it's been passed down from generation to generation. And really the antidote, the medicine for shame, it is self-love, it is acceptance, and it's being able to reveal to accepting people, like not just anyone. So as a therapist, a coach, a really dear friend, if you had a really amazing partner, letting almost like revealing these bad parts of yourself and realizing that they're not bad. You're still lovable, even though you have this bad part. And it's this paradox. It's like when we can really accept and bring our bad parts to the light, we can really accept all parts of ourselves. Those bad parts almost begin to transform. Because sometimes we think that, like, it's like a tumor. For me to be presentable, for me to be lovable, acceptable, for me to be healthy, I gotta first find out this tumor and
Mm.
get rid of it. And then I could be healthy. Then I could show up in relationships. And I think that's a very like Western approach. I think it's almost like that's an approach that we can't use that same approach when it comes to our emotional, psychological, or spiritual wound. We can't take that almost that Western medicine approach and apply it to the other dimensions of our health, of our well-being.
Mm. Yeah. I want to pick your brains a little bit more about shame, Kai, because I see it a lot with clients of mine. Just working with one just this morning, actually. That's why it's fresh in my brain, where we were talking about shame. Because a
Mm,
pattern that I notice a lot with anxiously attached individuals is they wrap the shame up in people-pleasing behaviors. And
yeah.
they try to be perfect, this perfectionism, this people-pleasing. But really, deep down, what we're noticing is the inner child is drowning in shame, in the shame tumor that you mentioned,
Mm,
of I'm not enough,
yeah.
I'm a disappointment, I'm letting people down,
Mhm.
I'm a failure, and leading that then into a I'm going to be abandoned, I'm going to be rejected. And you
Mm,
mentioning about the Western approach there, but I'm curious, what do you feel like would be what would be your approach? What would be something that you would advise people that are in this space where shame is very present for them? Like it's leaking into
yeah.
relationships, their lives, where they're literally just beating themselves up all the time, the inner critic, the people pleasing, the perfectionism. How can they start to remove that shame from within?
Yeah, basically inner child healing work, it is kind of like shame, like toxic shame releasing work, where really it's really for us to almost become this loving, safe, accepting home inside of ourselves for all parts of us. So I work with my clients in like different levels where it's like, first off, it's very, practical. So early on in the program, I teach them, I guide them on how to meditate. So they practice mindfulness, really helping them to be able to calm and ground themselves, but also begin to almost become aware of their mental landscape. Because really, without that mindfulness and that awareness, it really helps them be able to observe and catch those negative, critical, shaming thoughts. To also be able to ground themselves, calm themselves, but really change this relationship that they have with their thoughts. Because we're not our thoughts. Uh, and I also teach them another practice. It's a Buddhist practice called loving kindness. So they also grow their self-love and their kindness towards themselves. And it's really done in a meditation seating and just offering ourselves, loving, affirming phrases. So I teach my students, meditate, and it's really like kind of like connecting with your heart space and using these images of loved ones to be in this practice with. And it really has to start with being loving and kind towards ourselves first. So I teach them, may I be loved, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be free. So these are kind of daily practices for them to train their awareness, their inner calm, and also to train their self-love and being kind. Because really, this is like a lifelong journey. And it's almost like if you ask yourself, what makes a good parent or a good enough parent? What qualities does this parent have? So they're loving, they're kind, they're aware, they're sensitive, they're calming. And then asking ourselves, like, how can I be this way every day? It could be very practical, or you discover these tools, some of their spiritual tools, psychology tools, and you have to practice it daily, like regularly. So really, with the inner child healing work, it is kind of making a connection. And we have more than just one wounded child. There could be a wounded baby, toddler, preschooler, grade schooler, teenager. So it's almost like there's an awesome documentary with Jonah Hill. I think it's called Stutz. It's him and his therapist. And it, it, it doesn't directly talk about inner child and shame, but indirectly, it's a beautiful example where Jonah Hill, he's famous now. He's like more skinny and whatever, but he's very insecure. He has a lot of like problems with himself and his relationships. And there's this beautiful scene where he has this life-size cutout of himself when he was 13. Because him as a 13-year older, that was the age where it was the most difficult for him. He was bullied a lot. He had like acne, he was really big. And as an adult, his present day self, when he thought back about that age, he felt so ashamed. So same with us. It's like for us to almost like know that this healing is working. Can you vividly imagine, like look at yourself at a younger age? And can you see yourself through the lens of love, proudness? And can you feel like, yeah, like who you're seeing is like, oh my God, this is amazing, amazing girl, amazing boy, teenager. I'm so proud of them. Um, I forgot your question.
No, you answered it beautifully. Just wanting to pick your brains with some maybe Eastern practices
Oh, yeah.
bring in. And you talked about the loving kindness meditation, which also has transformed my life. But just tying that in
Mm,
doesn't mean if, like I said, if you're not quite there yet with your parents, loving kindness and compassion with others, it starts with you. That's the message I was getting from you, Kai. It starts with you and
mhm.
all your different parts. The grumpy teenager, the
Yeah,
insecure teenager, the, emotionally neglected toddler, whatever that looks like, that little girl that feels like such a disappointment, and being with them,
yeah.
being that parent self. And I love what you mentioned. I love this, and I'm going to definitely steal it from you, is What makes a good enough parent, and how can we start to integrate that into ourselves and be that for ourselves? I love that suggestion as well.
Yeah. So that'll be like, how we talk to ourselves, like not just out loud, but inside, And
Hmm.
it's also like how we stand up for ourselves and the choices that we make. Like almost like when you do this inner child work, it's almost like you and like your little children are always there with you, right? So it's like if you're with someone who's like you just met them, they're kind of rude, disrespectful, it's like, are you being a good parent, by keeping closeness with this person?
Hmm.
And or is the right thing to do that you can still respect this person, but choose not to be in their energy because they're not someone that makes your children feel safe, respected. So it's almost like when you do this work, you are both like your children, but you're also, well, it's like a three thing. Like you're both your inner children, but you're also the present day adult, and you're also the wiser guardian, like the wiser parent self that you're kind of stepping into. So it's kind of like you unlock this dimension that my present day self. But a lot of times these emotional dysregulations, these fears, this negativity, it's not your adult self that's coming out. It's your little girl, it's your little grade schooler, it's your teenage, Samantha. It's your like toddler Kai who's like feeling so angry because I'm not being listened to, I'm being disrespected. So you begin
Mm.
to really connect with which of my inner child is coming out right now
Love
and
that.
what do they need, you
Yeah,
know?
they need, and this is all parts work, isn't it? For anyone who wants to have a deeper dive into this, it's called IFS, Integrated Family Systems, and part work. And why I love this so much, because a lot of people think inner child work is like spiritual woo-woo, which, it can be, but there's so much science and research and psychology backed into this as well that is so powerful. And this is why I love it so much because it gives me a sense of detachment. Because a lot of us anxious folks, we will start to see these different parts playing out as our identity. We'll start saying, I am an anxious person, I am an angry person, when actually this is
Yeah.
not who you are in the entirety. This is just a part of you. So that's what I think.
Yeah.
We can start to see them as something within us and not we're not that part completely. And it is something that we can
Yeah.
integrate into ourselves in this way as well. So that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
take us into a different direction now, Kai, and talk about emotionally immature parents, because this is something that you specialize in. First of all, a curiosity question. Why this? Why specialize in helping people with emotionally immature parents?
Well, you being a coach, you would probably guess that, coaches with like niches, usually they went through this. So myself, my parents are both emotionally immature. And yeah, it was something that I had to deal with as a child, but I didn't know. It was confusing. And I'm still kind of working it through and healing from. But really, like when I first started my coaching business, like back in 2020, like over the last 4 years, like I've changed my title and specialization like quite a bit. So I started off as a happiness coach, then I started off as a boundaries coach, relationship coach. And then I think after that, I was like, specifically, I want to focus on family dynamics and adults who were raised by immature parents. And even though, I'm a recent published author with my own little workbook here, I stand firmly on the giant of Lindsay Gibson. So
Oh,
so
could you
this, like,
read out that
if you,
title of that book, Kai, for those who cannot see the video?
yes, right. So it's by Lindsay Gibson, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents: How to Heal from Distant, Rejecting, or Self-Involved Parents.
Hmm.
So it's during the pandemic, and I make frequent visits to like the local bookstore. It's like my happy place. And sometimes I don't even go there to buy a book. I just kind of look around. I just look at titles. I flip through books. But then one day, like this book was just there, and like it just caught my freaking eye. Like to be honest, like the cover, it's like very blah. It wasn't the cover that caught my. I'm very aesthetic, but it was the title. Like when I freaking read the title, I had no idea what this term meant, but something in me was like, we should get this book. So kind of going through this book, it gave me so many aha moments. Like, those aha moments when you read a self-help book, where it's like the author helps you unlock this puzzle piece. And it's just like, oh my God, like this all makes sense. And I think it's very important, for us to learn about this concept. But I'm also so passionate about teaching this, is I think that we have a problem right now with like overly diagnosing parents and people as narcissists, where I would argue that emotional immature adults is the bigger umbrella and narcissists are in this big umbrella. And I think the more that you might learn about this concept, you might realize that, okay, actually, they're not fully like diagnosable narcissists. They're actually emotionally immature and they're just very self-centered. But they're not a true narcissist who's grandiose and like literally consciously manipulative, you know? So I think it's very important for our own healing, but also for us to heal and to work in these relationships with our parents. Maybe they're actually emotionally immature and they're not like narcissistic. They're not intentionally trying to ruin your life, but they're just like a child. Like they have the emotional age of a 6-year-old.
Hmm. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that looks like for Kai? Like, how can we know if we have emotionally immature parents? What does that look like?
Yeah. So before I even talk about the characteristics and the traits, you know, emotional immature adults, they come from an emotionally volatile home that likely same thing that we went through. It was neglectful. There might have been emotional neglect, abuse. It wasn't safe. So it's really like, underneath the emotional immaturity, it is like a flower that didn't get all their needs met. And they have like arrested development when it comes to the emotional world. So in my book, I share these like 17 characteristics, which I'll share with you shortly. But I want to just quickly go through this little assessment quiz. So in Lindsay Gibson's book, she has several little check quizzes. So this one is assessing your parents' emotional immaturity. So these are just very common experiences. And the more that you check, the more that you could be like, okay, my parents are like very immature or just a little bit immature. So I'll just like rapidly go through a few of these. So my parent often overreacted to relatively minor things. Yes or no? My parent didn't express much empathy or emotional awareness. When it came to emotional closeness and feelings, my parent seemed uncomfortable and didn't go there. My parent was often irritated by individual differences or different points of view. When I was growing up, my parent used me as a confidant, but wasn't a confidant for me. My parent often said and did things without thinking about people's feelings. I didn't get much attention or sympathy from my parent, except maybe when I was really sick. My parent was inconsistent, sometimes wise and mature, sometimes unreasonable, reactive, immature. Conversations mostly centered around my parents' interest. Even polite disagreements could make my parent very defensive. So these are some like examples, but they do kind of point towards characteristics of emotionally immature parents or adults.
Oh, okay. Ooh.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's say we're saying yes, yes, tick, tick, tick. I believe that I have emotionally immature parents. How do we how do we navigate that now as adults?
Oh, it's confusing. It's different for every, child-parent dynamic. What can I say? Well, I think this is really where the inner child healing work comes in. So with this inner child healing work, part of it, it's beginning to see our parents more objectively, who they are today, but also who they were in the past. Um, because sometimes the sad truth, and it's going to be grieving, it's to be like, yeah, my parents weren't perfect. They might not even, have been good enough parents, and they may never become these parents that I need. So part of us healing and growing up is almost like stop wanting and needing things from our parents that they can't provide to us. Um, and that happens at a very deep level. So as you become your own parent and as you get what you needed emotionally from other adults, partner, friends, professional help, other family members, you get to almost free up this relationship with your parents. Because kind of what happens like unconsciously is that our wounded inner child still desperately wants and needs our parents. And they also desperately want them to be different. And we desperately want them to give us something that they may never learn how to give us. And inadvertently, we actually come off as judgmental. Like we come off as not really accepting our parents as who they are today. And this actually creates so much reactive dynamics, defensiveness, like fighting, arguing, spite, stubbornness. So it's this really weird paradox that when you start to grow your compassion and your discernment, and you start to see your parents as almost like adults, and you stop unconsciously demanding things from them, you're gonna find you're gonna free up so much emotional, mental energy. And now you get to decide as adults, how do I want to have this relationship with them? And how do I want to move forward? But part of you possibly improving this relationship, you're gonna have to be the mature adult, which means you're gonna have to learn communication skills, handling conflict, conflict resolution, setting boundaries. And sometimes I know some of you might get triggered. We're gonna have to be first the gentle parents to ourselves, our inner children. And then if you choose to, there's gonna be some moments where you gotta have to like gently parent your parents. And it's not like it was when you're a child, when you didn't have the skill, you weren't capable of being an adult. But now we choose to be kind, be empathetic, be encouraging, but also firm at times with our parents. That's because, we respect ourselves. We want to live in these values. And like from my own personal experience and also professional experience and helping my students, it's when they can inhabit this energy of being firm, being assertive, but also being gentle, kind, empathetic, and they change their language with their parents. That's when we increase the chances where our parents may be more receptive. They may be more willing to understand, and they might actually change with us.
Mm. Yeah, it was said to me before when I was doing my own research into this, Kai, about how to navigate this was don't try to change them, just like you said, because I feel like we want our parent to be the parent that we've always needed, but it's just not there. And I remember this being said to me, do not try to change your parents. Instead, work on acceptance. And I'm just echoing
Yeah,
that, accepting them for who they are, for also being wounded human beings. And I was receiving
yeah,
advice, and I'm like, yeah, it makes so much sense. I'm going to do it. And I love what you said about we get to decide what type of adult we want to be now in relationship to our parents. And again, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to stay true to my values. And then I'm
yeah, in the moment, yeah,
sometimes I don't
the
like
emotions take over.
it. And then, of course, we are all in those situations then where we're getting triggered and there's all sorts of stuff happening. And it feels like it's all our best intentions are falling apart and our energy is getting depleted. And then I noticed that when that is to happen, that's when the boundaries need to come in, right? Because yes, energy can be depleted very quickly when we are in a situation with an emotionally immature person, not even just a parent. So it's in those moments that we need to be able to put a boundary into place. So we don't then become an emotional
Yeah.
reaction to the situation or trigger that we're being presented with, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Because even though we might have physically, a lot of us left home, but we, at an emotional level, at a mental level, we haven't left home yet. And we're still kind of codependent and meshed with our parents, with their happiness, with their problems. And we can, overly think about it, invest ourselves emotionally with it. And even though we could be outwardly setting these boundaries, we might not internally have these lines established. And we could still be taking on too much and trying to control, trying to fix, thinking that it's our responsibility. And we even have that power to change someone, to make them happy, to make them not depressed anymore, to make them proud.
Mm.
And before I forget, I love what you echoed, echoing that, for someone to maybe help them change, it's to really accept them and not trying to judge them or shame them or to force them to change. But it's really the same approach, like say if you have a family member or a friend who's an alcoholic. Like I really believe a lot of the addictions, of course, there is some genetic components, but I think the addiction is a manifestation of toxic shame. So same with an addict. You're not helping him or her or them by judging them, by shaming them, by blaming them, by criticizing them. But it's really through acceptance, reminders, encouragement. That's like really the best way you can help this person realize that they need help, but also to help them, encourage them to stay sober, to go through rehab or whatever. So same thing with other relationships where our parents, even though they're not addicted per se, but they carry toxic shame and it manifests outwardly, maybe not in addictions, but in other ways. So for us to treat our parents with the same approach, acceptance, encouragement, and not shaming and blaming. And it's almost like I think this is really where the intergenerational breaking of patterns happen is that we no longer choose to pass on the shaming and the blaming because it's one of the most painful, negative forms of energy. And instead, at a personal level, so what is the personal change instead of victim or blaming or shaming? It is taking accountability. It's learning, but also being kind and gentle with ourselves. I promise you, you can grow just as much, just as fast. It'll be way more sustainable without shaming, without blaming. Like
Mm.
I promise you,
Mm.
you can grow and heal. If anything, you need to shift from that energy.
Yeah, and I second that. Shaming and blaming has no place here. It just beats us down even further. And Kai, do you think that this behavior is then leaking into the relationships that we have as adults, then the way that we may be trying to deal or have been trying to deal as a child with our emotionally immature parents? Do we then take that behavior and conditioning into our relationships? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, oh yeah. I was looking forward to this area. So yes, absolutely. Once again, it's a bit different from person and their relationship with their parents, the dynamics, how they witness their parents together, and then depending on the partner or friendship that you're in, because it's all like a dynamics and dance. There's this very confusing, dynamic, very intricate, very complex within ourselves, and then the other person, and then when our dynamics, are in a relationship together there's so many variables and connections and like influences. So yes, definitely our patterns that we have inherited, it will show itself within our relationships. Um, so one area that I'm very interested in, because most of my clientele are women, um, and they often have the anxious attachment style and they attract and they're very familiar with partners who are emotionally unavailable and avoidant. So with this dynamic, it's very interesting. I'm not saying this is all the reason why, but a lot of these women kind of grew up with parents where usually it's the father figure. He was emotionally unavailable, he was emotionally avoidant, and some of them, that their fathers literally physically abandoned them. So a lot of times we have these traumas that could be traumatic. We have these wounds, and what's important to understand is that these stories that we live by is told from a little child's mind. So even though we're adults, sometimes we don't think as objectively as we want to. And a lot of us are kind of playing out these child stories and fantasies. So sometimes what happened, especially I notice a lot with my women clientele, they try to fix what they couldn't fix as a child. They couldn't fix the relationship distance from their father. They couldn't get their father to pay attention to them, to love them, to make them feel like they're worthy, they're lovable, they're acceptable. Because it's almost like I don't know, this might be a gender thing. I know I'm probably just like I'm probably not as politically correct, but sometimes like the father figure, especially with a daughter, like you need your father's like approval, encouragement, support, and that almost gives you this coding that I am worthy, I am lovable, I am respectable, and this is how I'm to be treated by men. This is my standard with men. So without having that father figure who is nurturing, loving, available, emotional, encouraging, it's like there's still that little girl through your romantic relationships, especially, is kind of attracting, very similar, unavailable, avoidant, like your father. And it's almost like if I can change this guy, if I can fix him, if I can make him love me, if I can make him give me the attention that I need, then that almost will fix me. That will prove that I am lovable, I am worthy. So it's this childhood healing fantasy that little child believes. If I were to complete this fantasy, then everything will be better. I will finally believe I am lovable to the core. So the thing with these childhood healing fantasies, like even if you were able to do this impossible mission, you were able to change this guy from unavailable, avoidant to give you all the things that you need, it still won't fix you because you have to have this relationship with your child, you know, to love them, to accept them, to approve of them, to validate them. And this doesn't happen overnight. This actually happens in your life when this anxiety, this insecurity gets triggered, right? So the trigger isn't just what they're doing or who's triggering you. That's only half of it. The other half, which might be the more important half, is what thoughts, what beliefs, what emotions, what inner child is coming out. So now it's actually an opportunity for you to grow, for you to heal, for you to change rather than fixated. Oh, well, they shouldn't have done that. Oh, they do this to me.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I can just resonate with everything, except the father part, actually. My father was the most emotionally intelligent out of them both, shall we say. But yes, I
Mm,
think that is the most common pattern, right? The father figure. But for me personally, it was more the mother figure. But what I am
mm,
laughing at is I was really humbled with that truth that you just spoke about, that a partner cannot fix us. Because I was living that fantasy, shall we say, for a very long time, where I thought if I could just get this guy to love me and give me all that I want and make me feel special and make me feel chosen, then everything will be fine and I'll be healed and we can live happily ever after and ride off into the sunset. So I was like on a mission to turn this guy, and he wasn't even that avoidant, to be honest. It was more of a circumstantial thing as to why he was avoidant, meaning that it wasn't an emotional thing. It was more of a logistic thing that life was just not taking him into that direction. But still, I took on that mission. that I'm going to make myself his girlfriend and he is going to commit to me. And I was just so focused on that because I was being driven by this belief of if I can just get this love, then my life will be complete and I will be whole.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to do that for
Yeah.
myself, but meaning that he's going to come in and rescue me and he's going to fix everything. But I was so humbled in experiencing that that was definitely not the case because I couldn't
Mm,
receive it. He was trying to be a best partner and a healthy partner, but I didn't know what that looked like. So I thought that he was playing games with me half the time. And I'm like, why are
mm,
you not arguing back with me? Why are we not having a shouting match right now? No, I do not want to sit
mm.
down and have a nice conversation with you. I want to scream about it. And I then,
Yeah.
this sabotager coming out and just causing drama because it didn't feel familiar. And that's the thing,
Totally.
talking about the subconscious mind, right? Is we're always looking for familiarity. If we grew up with emotionally unavailable parent, that's what we're going to attract. And
Yeah.
it's about, yeah, balancing out that like subconscious beliefs that you were talking about to be able to understand and reprogram to be able to receive that.
Yeah, because right, imagine like if you somehow did attract your dream partner and they are emotionally mature and they are secure and they are willing and they love to give to you, but until you heal your wound, it'll never be enough and
Mhm.
you will sabotage.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, it's like we have to become self-reliant and we have to have the same loving relationship with ourselves that we want to receive from a partner and to be in a relationship with a partner. Because really, it's like the degree that we can be in a loving, respectful, empowering relationship, it's always going to match the level that you have with yourself. If you don't really love yourself, right? Even though you're the perfect person and they are loving, they are mature, they want to spend the rest of their life with you, you're going to sabotage, or it's never going to be enough. It's never going to fill this insatiable hole. Like this is this void that you have because no one can fill it for you.
Or you become dependent on them to meet all your needs and do everything for you. And you completely lose your sense of self in that then because
Yeah.
want to be rescued and fixed. And like you said, it's never enough. I was really humbled. And that's what really catapulted me into doing this work because I had that message loud and clear that it has to start with me. Unless I
Mhm.
can work on self love, self acceptance, self respect, boundaries, communication, all the things that we've been talking about today, unless I can get myself to that space, I cannot receive it. It doesn't land. It doesn't land.
Yeah.
It completely flies off me. So that was very humbling.
Mm.
So, Kai, I want to ask you a question because we're in very similar industries. Well, we're in the same industry in similar
Yeah.
way. I want to ask
It's
you a
very
question.
similar areas.
Yes,
Yeah.
that I have my personal belief on, and a lot of different coaches and therapists in our industry have different beliefs on. I want to know what you think. Do you believe that we can heal our attachment style and our emotional insecurity and immaturity and become that emotionally mature person before getting into a relationship? Or do you feel like that relationship itself is key to healing? So it kind of bounces from what we were just talking about.
Yeah. Oh, this is a great question. I would say yes and yes.
Mm.
Like, yes, as in, like, yes, there is some individual work that you need to do, but you'll never complete it. And you have to continue this work in a intimate relationship. So, like an example would be like, I have some clients before that have never been single at all. They kind of just jump from one relationship to one relationship, like since
You
they're
call them
13. And they're like,
my
yeah,
kangaroos.
yeah, you're kangaroo. Oh, I love it. Yeah, you're serial daters. So for them, I would highly encourage, and usually they come work with me after a breakup. So I encourage them that, okay, like let's give yourself a period of time being single, but not necessarily being single, like isolated and lonely, but being committed to the relationship that you have with yourself, but also with other relationships that are not romantic. So yes, sometimes it might be easier for you to do this work without the people that are really triggering you and they really like, oh, important. But sometimes that's not really realistic. And that's sometimes not the most responsible choice. But eventually, you're going to have to continue this work in a relationship. But what's important, especially if you're like a spiritual person, you want a lifelong partner for you to grow with, to be very discerning because not every partner or a close friend, or even like a therapist or a coach, might be capable. It may not be the best relationship for you to do this work in, but there's also sometimes people, depending on the timing, where they are, where we are, that relationship is actually not conducive for our healing. So that's really where we have to like have the discernment and to really see, does this person have these skills, capacities, intentions? So we could trigger each other and we could, work through it individually and together. Or are they lacking or am I lacking certain skills or intentions that it's not going to work out? Very quick examples. It's like very important that we both have a level of self-awareness and we take responsibility for our words, our behavior, for our own emotions. We have a level of communication skills. We could speak clearly, honestly, and we know how to listen. Because I know some of these sound like basic skills, but they're not basic skills. Not everyone has these skills. And can we handle conflict, even though it gets charged, but respectfully? So it's almost like we need to make sure this partner has these abilities. But sometimes, you don't know until you know. So that's why sometimes it's important to like go slow and date and, you know, spend some time before you commit. But also when you commit, like it unlocks new stuff. So I think sometimes, when we do go through a bad breakup, we get we get really like frustrated, upset. Like, why did we even go out together? Like, why did you decide to go out together if you were gonna be this way, if you didn't want these things? But sometimes it's like we learn through these relationships. And sometimes we don't know until we get committed and we try our best. But sometimes our best is just not good enough at that timing. And maybe during that time, it's just not a right fit and it's no one's fault. It's
Mhm.
no one's fault.
Yeah, love that. And I believe that we don't really know the emotional capacity or intelligence of another person until you have your first fight.
Yeah, 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 totally. Your
You said
first
that,
disagreement.
yeah. And then you can see how
Yeah.
you're going to navigate through these mucky waters together. And the way that I see it, it's a little bit like levels because all that you've described are absolutely perfect and correct. But for me, like personally, I couldn't be that person where I could manage conflict and communicate well because of so much that was happening for myself underneath all those beliefs and woundings. So I feel like that's, let's say, level one, where you do all that heavy lifting, the deep work, the really starting to unpack all the subconscious muck that is happening from underneath. And then getting into that relationship, which we've said is important. Eventually, you are going to have to get back out there and date and be in relationship with others. Otherwise, we're just avoiding. We're just avoiding all the triggers. So then we
Yeah.
upgrade like a game, right? We level up into level two, which is the relationship. And then we're really tested. We're really being
Yeah.
called to put everything that we've learned to the test and be able to be an emotionally intelligent person. So this is my next question for you, Kai, as we're rounding up this episode now is for anybody who's asking this question, okay, great. We talked a lot about emotional immaturity, but what does it look like to be emotionally intelligent? Whether people are here wanting to know how to be that person for themselves, or if they want to look out for it in other people. So I know it's a bit of a
Yeah.
ended question, but maybe it's going to be the same thing, or maybe not. You let us know. What does this look like?
Yeah. Great question. So so when you think about, emotional intelligence, it's almost like, just becoming knowledgeable at anything. And then I want you to think about emotional maturity is then, practicing it, experiencing it, then you become wise and mature. It requires experience. So what it means to develop emotional intelligence, which is like a muscle, we can train it, we can level it up, is kind of like four parts. Number one, being able to recognize what emotions are you currently feeling. And emotions is like a language of the body. They're electrical, they're chemical, they're somatic. So what energies are going through your system? So sometimes, this might be a more intellectual level of emotional intelligence, is being able to name your emotion. Am I feeling angry? Am I feeling scared, sad? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling surprised? Am I feeling disgusted? So you're going to have to expand your emotional vocabulary and almost begin to bring your awareness. Because sometimes I think a lot of us live in our heads. Like we think that who I am is this little homunculus living in my brain. But we neglect our entire body, our nervous system, what's below the neck. So becoming emotionally intelligent is actually becoming more bodily aware and becoming a full-bodied experience. So number one, recognizing, naming what you're feeling in the moment. Number two is being able to kind of across time continually monitor because emotions like they change, their energies. And usually we feel more than one emotion at once. And sometimes they feel like they're never going to leave. And sometimes we might be surprised that they just change in a second. And a third part of emotional intelligence is, do you have the ability to manage, to understand, to regulate these emotions? And then the fourth part is, can you healthily express these emotions? Whether it's by yourself, like screaming or like crying, or it's with another person screaming in front of them, not towards them, but allowing yourself while they hold space. You're going to be angry and scream and punch a pillow or cry and be supported by them. And sometimes we express our emotions through words. So, hey, I didn't like the other day where you didn't reply for 4 hours. It made me feel very anxious or whatever, right? So we need to learn how to healthily express these feelings. So that's kind of like the four, you can think of them as sometimes like linear growth with your emotional intelligence. So step one, being aware, recognizing, naming. Step two, being able to recognize it across time. Step three, understanding what these feelings are trying to tell you. They're messengers and being able to manage them, regulate them with your tools. But so part of becoming emotional intelligence, like your goal is not to be calm all the time. It's not to not have negative feelings. It's growing your capacity to recognize, allow all your emotions, because emotions is like the end product of events. So you're not supposed to just always feel calm and never feel anxious or whatnot, because these are emotional signals telling us valuable information about what's happening outside of us or inside of us. But we're also responsible for managing these emotions, and we don't act out of them in ways that can create harm. And then you practice this, across time in your relationships, one trigger at a time, and then you will grow more emotionally mature.
I love that differentiation that you gave us, that emotionally intelligence is everything that we can start to learn about ourselves. Like you said, the understanding, acknowledging, and then immaturity is practicing and experiencing what it means to be emotionally intelligent. Yeah, I love that differentiation.
Yes.
Thank you, Kai.
Yeah.
One more question before we round up this incredible episode, which is just absolute fire. That is, what is the one thing you wish more people understood about emotional intelligence, relationships as a whole?
Mm, yeah, great question. Well, I just want to, be very encouraging that, very proud of the listeners for being here today and listening, to this episode. So what's important is to realize that we are complicated beings and we have different levels, different dimensions. So I really believe, like in the 70s, the 80s, we learned about the benefits of physical exercise, like Zumba, aerobics, And then in the 2000s, the 90s, we learned about mental health, therapy, self-help, personal development. So I think really the next stage of our human evolution is realizing that there's also the emotional world. We also have emotional well-being. So I really encourage us to invest your time and your energy to work on yourself, to realize that we have maybe more control and power over our emotions, and for us to kind of, as we move into this emotional work, it's really about how can I be more aware, more accepting, more kind with my body? And how can I almost like, I think this healing process and this emotional process is kind of like, opening and closing. Like, how can I open, oh, the fear, oh, it's so uncomfortable, oh, feeling this emotion, or even acknowledging that I'm feeling this way, and then talking about this, expressing this, it's kind of open, being vulnerable, being brave, and then closing, you know? But it's this gradual process where you're going to open maybe a bit further, stay open longer, close. And then maybe eventually you will be able to stay open for longer and longer. So yeah, I really hope the listeners, I really believe that my past doesn't have to be my future. And like we talked about earlier, you are not an anxious person, an angry person, a sad person. These are just fleeting emotions. Like you are the person, you are the being that experiences it. So I really wish you all to feel, joyous, happy, free, and lighter, and really believe that this is a possibility for you. And sometimes it can happen sooner if we just allow it sometimes.
Mhm. Beautiful ending. Kai, thank you so much for joining us here on the Relationship Rehab podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on and share your wisdom with us. If people, listeners, want to know more about you, want to find you and consume more of you, where can they find you?
Yeah, same, Sammy. I really love this conversation. I feel so like full. I know earlier when we started, I was like, oh, I'm feeling a bit tired and stuff. But now I feel like I just had like 10 espresso shots. So if listeners, you want to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Hi Coach Kai, like hi as in like waving, like Hi, Coach Kai. I also have a website at www.hicoachkai.com. You can find more resources, like get a copy of my workbook. I have courses. I offer online coaching programs. So visit my website, and I also have free quizzes. So you can assess just how emotionally mature you are.
Mm.
So you can find more resources there. And I would love to connect with some of you. And maybe down the road, we could even work together. I would really love that.
Yeah, then go check out Kai's content because honestly, it's fantastic. And he has that quiz, am I emotionally intelligent, which is fantastic because sometimes we don't even know. We just need to have an assessment on that as well. So all of the links that Kai has just mentioned, you can find in the show notes below. So go and check him out. He is a phenomenal human being with so much wisdom to give. Kai, thank you again so much for being here with us. And I really hope that if you've made it this far, this episode has been super helpful for you. And if you need any further support, like Kai said, reach out to either himself or to myself. And yeah, that's all that's left to be said. Just a big, big thank you to you, Kai, for sharing with us.
Likewise. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Relationship Rehab podcast. I hope that this episode has supported you in healing, growing, and evolving out of insecure attachment and unhealthy relationship patterns and into safe, authentic love with yourself and others. If you enjoyed the episode, it would mean the absolute world to me if you would just take a second to rate and review this podcast. Every rating and review from you guys counts as it really helps this podcast to grow so it can reach more people who need to hear this content. And don't forget to connect with me on social media. Take a screenshot of this podcast episode, share it on your IG stories and tag me at the.relationship.rehab with your biggest takeaway from the episode. I really do love reading them. See you back here next week for another episode on the Relationship Rehab podcast.